Introduction to Statistics. Statistics has a great influence in almost all fields of human endeavor. It may have different meanings, but what matters is how we understand statistics so we can make proper judgments when a person or company presents us with an argument supported by data. Thus, there is a need of statistical data in every walk of life. Whenever we watch television, listen to radio, or read newspapers, magazines or books, we encounter statistics. Statistics plays a vital role in all intricacies of life. With regard to its etymology, the word statistics was derived from the Latin word status, or from the Italian word statista, which means political state or government. It is actually used to describe collection, reliability, organization, presentation, analysis, and interpretation of data, and not just a collection of numerical results. We have here two divisions of statistics. The first one is descriptive statistics. It is a statistical procedure that is concerned with the description of the characteristics and properties of a group of persons, places, or things which are based on easily verifiable facts. It also organizes the presentation, description, and interpretation of the gathered data. It also includes the study of relationships between or among variables. On the other hand, inferential statistics is a statistical procedure that draws inferences from the population on the basis of information obtained from the sample using the various techniques of descriptive statistics. Here, Table 2.1 shows the difference between descriptive and inferential statistics. In descriptive statistics, it describes what is or what the data shows, provides summaries about the sample and the measures, describes the data in hand, simply describe what's going on with the data, uses sampling techniques, presents the summary, measures of data, and works in a normal distribution. For example, the descriptive statistics answers questions like, how many students are interested to take statistics online? Or, a basketball player wants to find his average shots for the past 10 games. Inferential statistics, on the other hand, draws conclusions and extends beyond the immediate data alone. It also infers from the sample data that the population might think, infers the nature of a larger set of data, makes inferences from the data to more general conditions. It uses sampling distributions and hypothesis testing, uses simple time series analysis, correlation, and regression, and works in a test on proportion and chi-square. For example, inferential statistics answers questions like, is there a significant difference in the academic performance of the male and female students in statistics? Or, a politician wants to estimate his chance of winning in the upcoming senatorial election. Now, read the research article about the Philippine Economic Update, Investing in the Future, then classify whether each statement is descriptive or inferential. Write DS on the space provided for each number if it's descriptive statistics, and IS if it is an inferential statistics. Let's proceed to Lesson 1, Data. At the end of the lessons, the students are expected to define what data is and identify its types, classify information according to their level of measurement, identify the most common use methods of data collection, and determine the different ways of deriving a sample and identify the different methods of presenting a data. Data is a set of observations, values, elements, or objects under consideration. We have four types of data. The first one, raw data. It pertains to the data collected from the original information. Group data. This data is placed in a tabular form and characterized by class intervals with a corresponding frequency. Primary data. This data type is measured and gathered by the researcher who published it. And secondary data. This type of data is republished by another researcher or agency. We're going to compare this. Primary data are the information that we gathered firsthand, while secondary data second-hand. Levels of measurement. When we collect data, we usually classify the information obtained according to one of the four levels of measurement. We have the nominal level, the ordinal level, the interval level, and the ratio level. The lowest level of measurement is the nominal level. The data at this level of measurement consists of names only, or qualities with no implied criteria by which the data can be identified as greater than or less than other data items. For example, sex, male or female, soft drinks brands, Pepsi, fruit soda, Coke or Sparkle. Religious affiliation can be INC, Roman Catholic, Aglipayan, and the likes. The next level of measurement is the ordinal level. The data at the ordinal level may be arranged in some order, but the actual differences between the data values are neither determined nor meaningless. In other words, the ordinal level of measurement permits the rank ordering of the members of a group, but exact differences are not computed. Example: responses of students on the faculty evaluation sheet, like 4 as excellent, 3 as very satisfactory, 2 satisfactory, and 1 as poor. The third level of measurement is the interval, which is like the ordinal level, but it has the additional property. Therefore, the meaningful differences between the data values can be computed. However, interval level data may not have a starting point or 0 point. Consequently, differences are meaningful, but ratios of data values are not. Example: mental ability as defined by IQ, and also temperature. Number 4, and the last level is the ratio level. It is the highest level of measurement. This ratio level is similar to the interval, but it includes an inherent 0 as a starting point for all measurements. It means that 0 on the ratio level is meaningful. For example, length, weight, number of objects, height. For your next target practice, kindly categorize the measurements associated with student life according to level: nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. Lesson 1.2 Methods of Collecting Data. There are 5 most commonly used methods of data collection in educational and psychological researchers, like interview method, questionnaire method, observation method, registration method, and experiment method. Table 2.2 shows the differences and the characteristics, advantages and disadvantages of these methods of data collection. Under interview or direct method, it is a person-to-person exchange between the interviewer and the interviewee. The advantage of this is it can provide consistent and more precise information since clarification may be given by the interviewee. The questions may be repeated or modified to suit every interviewee's level of understanding. But the disadvantage for this, it is time-consuming, expensive, and has limited field coverage. Second method is the questionnaire or the indirect method. The characteristics of this, the responses are written and the research participants are given more time to answer the prepared questions. Advantages, it saves time and money, while in the interview, it's so expensive. Also, a large number of samples can be reached in a shorter span of time. But one of the disadvantages for this, there is a high level of probability of having no response, especially if the questionnaires are mailed. Observation method. Here, the investigator observes the behavior of persons or organizations and their outcomes. It is usually used when the subjects cannot talk or write. The data can be easily gathered here during the available time of the researcher since it can be done anytime. But the information may be subjected to subjective judgments. Under registration method, gathering information from the respondents is enforced by certain laws, policies, rules, regulations, decrees, or standard practices. Examples are the registration of births, deaths, motor vehicles, marriages, and licenses. Registration method is the most reliable information, which is kept systematized and made available of all because of the requirements of the law, but the data are limited to what is listed in the documents. And last method is experimental method or experiment method. It is used when the objective is to determine the cause and effect relationship of certain phenomena under controlled conditions. Experiment method can go beyond plain description, but there are lots of threats to internal and external validity. For your target practice, identify the best method of collecting data applicable in each objective. Write your answer on the second column aligned to the item number. Sampling techniques. The term sampling refers to the process which involves selecting a part of the population, making observations on these representative groups, and then generalizing the findings to the bigger population. Also, it refers to the strategies which enable you to pick a subgroup from a larger group and then use this subgroup as a basis in making judgments about the larger groups. There are 2 kinds of sampling techniques: the probability sampling and the non-probability sampling. Probability sampling is a technique where all elements in the population frame have an equal chance of being selected. We have types of probability sampling, like random sampling. This is done by using a lottery sampling or table of random numbers. To illustrate this, number each subject in the population. Afterwards, place each number in a fishbowl and select as many card numbers as needed. Then, the subjects whose numbers are selected will constitute the sample. Systematic sampling. This is done by numbering each subject of the population and then selecting every kth number. Stratified sampling. Stratified sampling is a sampling strategy in such a way that specific subgroups or strata will have a sufficient number of representatives within the sample to provide ample numbers for sub-analysis of the numbers of these subgroups. Strata are designed so that members in each stratum are more homogeneous, that is, more similar to each other. The results are then grouped together to form the sample. This technique is particularly useful in populations that can be stratified into groups by gender, race, or geography. Cluster sampling. Cluster sampling occurs when you select the numbers of your sample in clusters rather than use separate individuals. It is a sampling strategy in which groups, not individuals, are randomly selected. Last, the multi-stage sampling. This technique uses several stages or phases in getting the sample from the general population. However, the selection of the sample is still done at random. Next here is non-probability sampling. It is a strategy where not all elements in the population frame have an equal chance of being selected. Under non-probability sampling, the following strategies are considered. First, purposive or deliberate sampling. This type of sampling strategy is based on certain criteria laid down by the researcher. Thus, the people who satisfy the criteria are interviewed. Quota sampling. In quota sampling, you identify a set of important characteristics of a population and then select your desired samples in a non-random way. It is assumed that the samples will match the population with regard to the chosen set of characteristics. For instance, if you are required in a research class to determine the most favored soft drinks from a population of televiewers who should interview televiewers who drink soft drinks, you continue this process until you arrive at your quota. Next, and the last, is convenience or accidental sampling. This sampling is based on the convenience of the researcher. For instance, if you want to know the opinion of Filipinos about national reconciliation in the Philippines through telephone interviews, you will have the chance to interview only those who have telephones, which somehow manifests bias against those who have no telephones. For your target practice, identify what sampling technique is exemplified in each statement. Write your answer on the second column, aligned to the item number. The next question here is on how we present our data. Our collected data must be organized in order to show significant characteristics. In presenting our data, we have to consider three ways. The first one is textual, wherein it uses words to present, or in a paragraph form. Tabular, on the other hand, the data are presented in rows and columns. And for graphical, the data are presented in a visual form. Textual form is the simplest method of presenting data, particularly when there are only few numbers to be presented. In this form, Results are explained in a paragraph form. This includes enumerating the important characteristics and emphasizing the most significant figures and highlighting the most striking attributes to the set of data. Example, in the College of Education, the data show that out of 186 freshmen, 89 of these, or 47.85%, are male, while 97 or 52.15% are female. In tabular form, the data are presented in a systematic and orderly manner to catch one's attention, as it may facilitate the comprehension and analysis of the data presented. The frequency distribution table is a statistical table showing the frequency or number of observations contained in each of the defined classes or categories. The following are the parts of a statistical table. The first is the table heading, which includes the table number and the title of the table. Next part is the body, wherein it refers to the main part of the table that contains the information of figures. Third is the stubs or classes, wherein it refers to the classification or categories describing the data and are usually found at the leftmost side of the table. And last is the box head, wherein it is located at the top of the body. For example, the Table 1, which shows the frequency and percent distribution of the respondents by sex. The body consisted of the sex, the frequency, and the percent, while the stubs or classes comprises the categories of their sex, which are male and female. And the body consisted of the total. Next is the graphical form. In this form, the data are presented in a visual form. The numerical data provided in a frequency distribution or contingency table can be made more interesting and easier to understand when depicted in a graphical form. A graph is a pictorial presentation of a given set of data. It should have good appearance and should be accurate, clear, and simple. We have different types of a graph. We have the scatter graph. It is a graph used to present values or measurements that are thought to be related. For example, the scatter plot of the amount of garbage discarded and household sized. Next here is a line graph. It is a graphical presentation of data especially useful in showing trends over a period of time. This graph is used when the data are interval or ratio. For example, the Microsoft at work. The blue line represents the bags, the orange line represents the security holes, and the gray one represents the vectors. Next here is a bar or a column graph. It is like a circle graph and only applicable to group data. This consists of bars or heavy lines of equal widths, either vertical or horizontal. This graph is used when the data are considered nominal and ordinal. Example, the frequency distribution of a student's perceptions on the behavior of the teachers. We have strongly favorable, favorable, slightly favorable, unfavorable, and strongly unfavorable. It is also known as a circular or pie chart. This is used to represent the parts that make up a whole. Pie charts are most effective when illustrating budget allocations of a family or an agency, or in dealing with qualitative variables involving popularity. This graph is used when the data is nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. However, it is not practical to use a pie chart when there are more than 5 or 6 possible values for a variable. Example here is the monthly budget of Mr. Manaligud's family with an income of 15,000. 20% for shelter, 40% for food, 15% for education. For miscellaneous, it's 5%, electric bill 10%, and clothing 10%. For your target practice, kindly determine whether the statement is true or false. Write your answer on the second column aligned to the item number. You can pause this video while answering this practice.